This is how it happened. This is how the zombie Spider-Man died. Again. The mysterious hunger gospel virus has infected all of Earth's superheroes and villains. They quickly consumed nearly every living piece of meat on the entire planet and then turned on each other. A handful of zombies imbued with the power cosmic after devouring Silver Surfer were given an unprecedented edge that allowed them to take out nearly every other zombie out there. Then they turned to the source and consumed Galactus to get even more of a boost, making them the new cosmically empowered devourers of worlds. The zombie Galactus team now had the ability to fly through space at immense speeds and project energy blasts that could destroy nearly anything they aimed at. So they left the ruins of their homeworld and went on a decades-long buffet through the rest of the universe. We checked in on them briefly as they worked their way through the Skrull homeworld, but what happens when they run out of food? Again? The same creative team of Robert Kirkman and Sean Phillips reassembled for a sequel that does follow up on all the crazy lore now established in these other entries. The zombies have spent decades consuming all the meat in the known universe. Considering it only took them a day or two to work through an entire planet of billions of people, and traveling from one inhabited planet to the next is incredibly fast for them now. It's surprising they hadn't done it sooner than 4 decades. That means there's no life left in any corner of space. It's hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of planets that once very recently had intelligent life and full-grown societies just left empty. This is an entire universe full of abandoned buildings and dried blood stains, scattered like drops of arterial spray across a vast ocean of blackness. Except that camp they forgot to kill back on Earth. Those guys are alright. Kinda crabby. Once the realization sets in that they killed every civilization in space, the galactized zombies have no choice but to go back to Earth, which is where survivors have been attempting and failing to rebuild in their absence. T'Challa has started a new Wakanda in the ruins of New York and raised multiple generations of a family. There's drama over leadership on Earth and the direction this tiny, surviving human race should go. Different generations have different plans and different perspectives. T'Challa can't rule forever, and change is on the horizon with a young mutant leader named Malcolm Cortez planning a hostile takeover any day now. Having kept Janet Van Dyne's infected head for all these years to study the virus, the survivors have discovered that if you wait long enough, the zombies will actually stop feeling the hunger. It's just that none of the other ones ever stopped eating long enough to feel the hunger fading. This is triply confirmed when they find Hawkeye's head in the rubble near the city, and then T'Challa himself is infected by the Wasp to save his life after one of Malcolm's assassins mortally wounds him. T'Challa and Wasp lock themselves in a room for a few weeks, and eventually, the hunger leaves them. Writer Robert Kirkman also takes time to explore the zombie experience once again by showing us that they no longer need to sleep, and they never feel tired, which in itself is very creepy. But once enough time has passed, they really do have no desire or need to feed on living things. They're cured. Kind of. Even the Galactus crew is slowly discovering this same important information as they've run out of victims and are spending weeks flying back to Earth. Zombie Spider-Man tries to act as the moral compass of the group, and continues to remind all of them that what they're doing is wrong and evil. And maybe none of them deserve to continue existing after everything they've done. He's even still trying to maintain some sense of gallows humor to avoid being completely overwhelmed with guilt. Giant Man's an evil prick and just tells him to shut up, and he's perfectly happy being what they are. Giant Man even once said that if he was cured, he'd still probably keep eating people anyway because he just loves the taste of it so much. So there's an interesting feud starting to form between them because of their different perspectives on the hunger. It's fun to check back in with the original zombie crew and how they've been after so many years. Apparently they only rot and decay a little bit after being infected, and then it just stops. They don't age or decay any further. Their hair doesn't grow or turn gray. They all look exactly how they did 40 years ago. Give or take some additions they've picked up on the way to their costumes. It's a nice detail that their original Galactus-inspired armor is mostly whittled down to nothing after decades of combat and conquest. At some point, they picked up some robotic limb replacements for Spidey, Iron Man, Luke Cage, and Wolverine because they were pretty banged up the last time we saw them. Now Iron Man can actually stand again instead of just floating on cosmic energy. They also picked up some new Cosmic Marvel characters along the way that were too powerful for them to completely devour, so they infected them and added them to their ranks instead. They got Dark Phoenix, Gladiator, but not the cool Gladiator, it's the stupid Gladiator with the mohawk, Firelord, and Thanos on the team at some point in there. Though Thanos ends up not being an agreeable teammate for Hulk in the long run. I think this is just one of those great bits of world building by Kirkman where you can tell he tries to think through the logistics of things carefully, even in a fictional setting. Of course the zombies wouldn't be dressed exactly the same as how we last saw them half a century ago, and the new members of their team imply all kinds of stories we haven't seen happen in the interim. It's a good example of showing instead of telling, and just letting the audience infer whatever happened off-panel. It's fun to imagine whatever scenarios led from this scene to this scene. Eventually, of course, the zombies find a way to New Wakanda, and it becomes an all-out war for the fate of humanity, and to keep the monsters from using the multiverse teleporter to get any more victims. Spider-Man finally takes a stand and betrays Giant Man so he can protect the humans. Even Luke Cage joins him, finally finding his own humanity again. It seems like Spidey kind of inspired him. Giant Man doesn't take too kindly to this because this version of him is the most evil character ever, and we finally got some gruesome zombie versus zombie combat. I do think this arc is good, but it's just not as good as the first mini they did. There are a couple of interesting or wacky ideas that get thrown in there but aren't explored very well. Like they find zombie Hawkeye after he was decapitated by Magneto, and he's just extremely traumatized and emotionally fragile after being alive, unable to move or to sleep, and just laying in the street for 45 years with no human contact. Like, imagine what that does to someone psychologically. He's even terrified of them removing his mask because he thinks it's his face now. They stick him onto one of Wasp's old robot bodies so he can get around, which is kind of a funny visual gag, but he's never going to be himself again. He had potential to become this really tragic and interesting character, but he's unceremoniously killed off during all the fighting, and I think it was a bit of a waste. One of the Asteroid M scientists experimented with using Colonel America's zombie brain in another body, that being T'Challa's deceased adult son, and making some kind of Frankenstein's monster-like superhero to help them battle the zombies. But he also isn't used to the fullest extent and is just more of a crazy random thing thrown in there without paying off very well. Like, he just kind of stopped showing up at some point. I forget what happened to him. I mean, it's funny in a dark and twisted way, but it just doesn't contribute much. Like the first miniseries, this one is full of a ton of action and captures that feeling of a zombie movie perfectly, with the survivors in New Wakanda barricaded inside a force field while the undead try to break their way in. The power struggle is really exciting, and it's a shame when either side loses someone because the zombies in a way are victims too and can't control themselves. There's an inherent tragedy that the zombies are fully aware of how evil they've become and are so insatiable that they can't stop themselves from eating. Even if they're racked with guilt over killing friends and loved ones to feed the never-ending hunger. They want to stop, but they just can't bring themselves to do it. It just doesn't seem feasible. Some of them stop wanting to be cured and just accept that they're like this forever now. It's actually a better comic booky metaphor for addiction than the symbiote ever has been. That shit sucks, please stop doing it. But, much like an addiction, with a mix of willpower and persistence, it is possible to break it, even if you'll never be the same. The battle reaches a climax just as Giant Man finally realizes he's not hungry anymore. The Galactus zombie crew learn that after all of these years, that the hunger eventually does fade. It's just that they realized it far too late after massive casualties on both sides. But they vow to make reparations and help the humans finally rebuild. After all this conflict and chaos, the zombified King T'Challa declares peace when the more violent zombies have died and the more docile ones have had more time to detox from the hunger, making them creepy and immortal, but ultimately harmless. I just feel like I wouldn't really be cool talking to Giant Man after his head had been sliced open like that. Like, dude, I can see your brain. Can you cover that? Like, just put on a hat. The zombies intend to help New Wakanda find a new planet somewhere else in the multiverse to live on. But Malcolm Cortez decides he doesn't trust them, and he uses the finally repaired multiverse teleporter to send them somewhere else. And he's probably doomed humanity in this universe because they don't have enough genetic diversity to survive any more generations, so they're just gonna painfully, slowly die out over the next 100 years. But he doesn't care. He wins, and he gets to be in charge. He quite literally declares they're someone else's problem now, which is kind of what this creative team said too, because Kirkman and Phillips were done with Marvel Zombies from here on out, which is a damn shame. It's not as strong as the first series, but there's still so much going on here that you have to love. There's great drama, very well-developed characters and dynamics between them. I think the virus is so interesting as a concept, and this world has been so organically grown into its own unique storyline. I really wanted to keep following up on the specifics of New Wakanda and Kirkman's vision of these characters, but it just seems that wasn't in the cards, because we get a new creative team for every future Marvel Zombies book. Marvel Zombies 3 doesn't even follow up on this. Instead, all these loose ends get tied up in Marvel Zombies Return. The drop in quality from the previous books is as sheer as it is immediate, but we shall bear with it. This is where there's a small divergence with the Marvel Zombies line. If we were going by release order, we'd be reviewing Marvel Zombies 3 right now, but that's almost like a spin-off that doesn't follow up on the original series at all, really. Instead, we're reviewing the other miniseries that started a year later, just because I wanted to round out this whole thing and end on the original cast of Marvel Zombies, before we get to all the new stuff that happened after those characters were permanently retired. This is Marvel Zombies Return, the direct follow-up to Marvel Zombies 2, written by several authors across 5 issues, since it's kind of like an anthology, and with a new artist on each one as well. The Galactus Zombie Squad have been sent to another dimension, simply called Earth Z, but they're also scattered through time and in different locations. Spider-Man was sent furthest back to the past in New York, right here. Crisis on Campus. Cool issue. That's when he met Randy Robertson. While Wasp and Luke Cage ended up on the Kree and Shi'ar planets, even Black Panther was plopped onto the Skrull homeworld. Again. Giant Man ended up on the moon near Uatu's outpost, and Wolverine found himself in Japan. T'Challa's Colonel America Frankenstein's monster son was teleported to nowhere because the writers forgot he existed or just didn't care. Maybe he actually literally was just teleported out into the middle of space. The first major issue with this miniseries is a really noticeable lack of consistency between the previous miniseries and even between these chapters themselves, since the creative team changes every issue almost. Even as a kid, when I wasn't really paying attention to the names of the people making the comics I read, I could tell this was written by someone else after Marvel Zombies 2. Something about the tone, pacing, the dialogue, just all felt off. It didn't feel like Kirkman's Marvel Zombies, and I felt annoyed by the contradictions that immediately cropped up in this series. After Malcolm Cortez teleported the zombies away to this brand new dimension, there was some kind of bizarre biological reset in the process. All of the major injuries or damage their bodies had sustained were ignored. So Spider-Man was back to having 2 legs again. The top of Giant Man's head was restored, and presumably the rest of his brain. Zombie Wolverine had 2 arms again. There's zero explanation for this. They also somehow lost all of their power cosmic abilities they had from consuming Galactus decades ago. Though, at least this factor was acknowledged directly, unlike their magic reappearing limbs and costumes. This was one of the first times reading comics where I felt myself being disappointed by sloppy continuity. Because Kirkman put so much thought into the way the zombies were ripped apart and how that affected the story being told. Colonel America's exposed brain was a weakness that was exploited by his enemies. Spider-Man and Iron Man being unable to walk made them need a lot of help for feeding. Wolverine only having 1 set of claws made it harder for him to fight. And to just reset all of that so they look more traditional is a bit irritating. It's also really silly that all of their costumes magically regenerated too. Wolverine lost that arm 45 years ago, but now he's got a brand new blue glove and adamantium bones. Giant Man's skull cap was returned and his costume healed up too. Apparently this reset from teleportation also brought back the hunger that they had worked so hard to beat, and all of them found themselves crazed for flesh all over again. This change I can understand because without the zombies biting or eating people, there isn't really much of a story to be told. They'd just be decaying copies of the other Earth Z counterparts. As far as we can tell, Earth Z is just like the mainline 616 books, and there's not much else to it. It's not a total reinvention like the Noir universe or 1602 or something more subtly different like Ultimate. It's as close as you could probably get to the original place. Though here Moon Knight is listed as being the world's greatest detective for some reason. This is either one of those Colonel America style intentional changes or just the author erroneously thinking he's Marvel's Batman. Oh wait, I get it, they're supposed to be analogous to the Justice League, that's funny. Having the zombies be so scattered is a huge problem for Earth Z because they can start infections in different places and different times, and they naturally all formed armies on these different planets with the intention to have some kind of biblically epic war to end the zombie plague or continue propagating it forever. All of this is explained away very quickly in a 2-page montage. Several of these are major characters in the first 2 arcs, yet they're just hand-waved away here, and 99% of their story took place off-panel. That's just so disappointing for Black Panther especially. Even though Black Panther has thus far been the main heroic character we've been following through the first 2 arcs, he gets almost completely ignored here. This version of him deserved more of a conclusion than apparently killed off-panel. What is he, a symbiote host? Really, the main focus here is between Giant Man and Spider-Man becoming polar opposites. Giant Man has the hunger return, and he's completely off the wagon and planning to take over the whole multiverse with the Watcher's dimension hopping tech. He's right back on his evil mastermind beat. No wonder Ultron came from his brain. Spider-Man, however, gets 1 dose of the hunger and flies off the handle, accidentally killing all of Earth Z's Spider-Man related characters in a huge gruesome bloodbath, and then swears off the hunger forever, with the intention of finding a way to wipe out the zombies once and for all. This first issue, solely about zombie Spider-Man by writer Fred Van Lente and artist Nick Dragotta, was difficult to get through when I was still a kid. The blood and guts in the previous issues were kept to a minimum when possible, and the gore wasn't all that excessive, often shown in silhouette or in obscured close-ups with stylized colors. I could handle green and brown and pink slime coming out of the zombies. It all had this kind of haunted house Halloween level of fun to it. There's an important balance. If you go too crazy too often with the blood and gore, the audience becomes desensitized, and then the shock, the spectacle, and the fear just completely wears off. You stop feeling the impact of it, and it takes a master to go really over the top with it while also still being able to up the ante repeatedly. In Marvel Zombies 1 and 2, the gore wasn't trying to be all that extreme or disturbing, it was just there. Even though Kirkman is definitely capable of such in his other work. Boy is he. This book needed a deft touch, and he knew when to show restraint and when to go for the jugular. Marvel Zombies Return issue 1, however, had no qualms about showing stuff that would have been depicted off-panel in the original book, like Aunt May and Mary Jane being eaten. There's nothing off the table here, nothing too sacred, nothing they won't do to make the reader squirm. They want you to be uncomfortable. When Zombie Spider-Man sees the Sinister Six again, he's overcome with the bloodlust and starts brutalizing them for food. It made me feel sick to my stomach when I first saw this. I was maybe 10 years old reading this the first time, and there was something so disturbing about how the art looked so colorful and classic and true to John Romita Sr. era comics, and then it just turned so disgusting. They hold nothing back in this issue, and it really upset me and put me off reading the rest of the miniseries for a long time. I'm not sure what changed behind the scenes that this book was allowed to be so much more explicit with the violence than the previous ones, but I think it wasn't to the benefit of the series. Don't get me wrong, I have come around to extreme gore in my movies, games, and comics as time has gone on. I'm very desensitized to it now. Here are some of my favorite movies. I'll eat chicken wings watching this stuff, but seeing bright, poppy, and colorful Spider-Man doing these terrible things, my childhood hero and role model, it was just kind of hard to stomach for a kid. Not to get all that's gore of my comfort character, but this is some pretty sick shit to do with Marvel's mascot, and I wonder how editorial let it get published like this. These days, I'm looking at the art and realizing it's not nearly as bad as I remember it being. I mean, it's just a drawing for God's sake. It's red ink on a piece of paper, but it's still trying way too hard to shock the reader, and I feel these sequences come across trashy and exploitative. Like, there was no reason to draw Mary Jane this way in her death scene. Come on, that's just being childish. Show some class. He's even shooting his arteries out of his wrists instead of webs. Kirkman wouldn't have written that because he's enough of a freak about internal fictional logic that he'd know Spider-Man would run out of usable veins and arteries after 1 or 2 swings, so it's not a viable method of traversal. I don't know why I made him sound like that, but that's, yeah. After he unintentionally infects the Sinister Six, they in turn attack and kill every character from Spider-Man's sidecast, who are conveniently all in the same place. Which drives zombie Spidey to despair because everyone he knows is dead again. Sandman is even at risk of being infected like his counterpart from the Zombieverse. But Spidey says eating him wouldn't actually help the hunger, presumably because he's just sentient sand particles. Sandman escapes from the battle and then encounters the human Spider-Man of Earth Z, thinking he's still the zombie one since they were wearing the same costume. In a panic, he basically does a Mortal Kombat fatality to him by flowing through his mask, down his throat, and then bursting out of him. Holy death by DeviantArt! Hey, has anyone seen Sandman? Spider-Man with a suspiciously Sandman-shaped belly. No, haven't seen him around. Have you checked the library? Not only do you see zombie Spider-Man ripping people to shreds and explicitly eating them in this, you also see normal human Spider-Man be horrifically exploded from the inside by one of his villains. Tasty. So, zombie Spider-Man, insane with grief and rage and wanting to shed the identity of Peter Parker forever, tears his skin off to do the most grotesque Spider-Man No More homage ever. And again, this just feels like it's doing too much. It's trying too hard to be gross and upsetting, and it feels really trashy compared to the first 2 arcs. I know this is meant to set up Zombie Spidey's arc for the rest of the miniseries, but this is just morbid and over the top in a way that feels dumb. Like a 13-year-old came up with it. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive because it's Spider-Man. I have this feeling that if this issue was about any other character who I wasn't as attached to, I probably wouldn't care as much. I've read shit like Luther Strode and goddamn Crossed, and I didn't feel this way reading those, so that really might be it. Even though this is a pretty irreversible injury, would you believe that him skinning himself is completely ignored by the next 4 issues and they kept drawing him with skin in all of these? Sure, he looks weirdly old and decrepit in issue 3, but that's still hair and skin. He has a nose. Then in issue 4 and 5, he's just back to normal. So they make you look at this gross out shit and then don't even commit to it. Likely because communication between artists was minimal or non-existent. Felicity Hardy, the identical twin sister of Felicia. Also, she kills Iron Fist in this panel, and then here he is the next day. Does that mean Iron Fist also has a twin brother? Fuck off! Issue 2 sees Giant Man teleporting to Earth to steal technology from Stark Enterprises. Earth Z Iron Man is going through his Demon in a Bottle story arc and struggling with his alcoholism, making him unable to fight back. Interestingly, we finally see first-hand evidence that the hunger virus really can just take anyone if they're allowed enough time to turn, not just superheroes. I mean, it's been implied by characters with no superpowers being turned, but now we finally just get to see it. Giant Man starts weaponizing civilian zombies to make an army so he can take over the building. He just bites Happy Hogan, sends him off to bite someone else, they bite someone too, and so on. Pym tells them that he'll help them feed and adjust to being zombies if they do what he says, so he's already back to being a conniving, evil leader of the undead. Telling you, man, Zombie Giant Man is the biggest bastard in the multiverse, and not just because he's tall. Tony Stark sacrifices himself to spread a swarm of nanomachines through his zombified employees that destroys dead cells, and Rhodey becomes the new Iron Man in his place. This is one of those things where it's fun to see how the events of this world are different from the original Zombieverse, and even though it's a lot of the same characters battling the same virus, the events don't play out exactly the same. Instead of everything falling apart during what would have been this world's 70s era, time passes and we get to see this Earth progress into the modern day around the mid-2000s, with more recent stories like World War Hulk and the formation of the Illuminati with Rhodey in Tony's place. The zombie infections broke out in small pockets here and there, but were mostly repelled for the first few years by the heroes of this world. Turns out normal people turned into zombies are pretty easy for a superhero to deal with, as opposed to other super people being infected. Spider-Man has been trailing behind the other zombies, feeding on their leftovers to keep himself sane and focused while he tries to build a vaccine against the virus. Plus, it stops anyone else from turning if he ensures that their bodies are completely consumed. He's just been in the shadows keeping everything in check and no one has even noticed. Eventually, he helps the Earth Z Shadowcat and Earth Z Wolverine kill his zombified counterpart. while Ant-Man is off trying to figure out how to hop dimensions again. He's also making his big move by infecting the Inhumans and the Hulk of this world. During his rampage, Hulk tricks the Sentry into powering down back to good old Bob Reynolds and bites him too. And that's just the end of it all. This is the point of no return. As soon as Sentry and Hulk are both infected, arguably the two physically strongest beings on Earth, the virus accelerates and the world is done soon after. As much as they tried to stave it off over the course of a couple of years, Earth-Z fell about the same way once someone powerful enough was bitten, albeit much slower and done more strategically this time. There's a big time skip between issue 4 and 5. Apparently decades have passed and this world looks frighteningly familiar. All the people are gone, all the heroes and villains are dead or infected, even the Galactus of this universe has been consumed. Though there are some differences. Giant Man's new version of the Zombie Avengers somehow ate Galactus again, but didn't get his cosmic powers this time. The book just completely glosses over that, even though that is huge. We can infer that Giant Man knew too many infected heroes would mean losing the food supply faster, so a lot of characters who did turn in his original timeline are instead just completely devoured in this one to avoid having to share with them if they were infected. There were literally crowds of hundreds of super zombies originally, and that led to conflict over dwindling food. So I guess it was smarter to keep the zombie population much smaller. Giant Man has also infected a few super intelligent characters to use as organic supercomputers to help him break into Uatu's technology or scour the globe for more food, so he can be more thorough about killing everyone. God, I feel bad for my namesake in this universe. I do, however, like all these implications of him hitting this world with a more structured and systematic plan for the outbreak, instead of it being unfettered chaos like last time. That feels very in character for zombie wife beater, evil asshole. As all of this has been happening, Zombie Spider-Man has built his own team with the intention of destroying all zombies. He's got the now infected Earth-Z Wolverine, Zombie Hulk, and still human Rhodey as Iron Man safely tucked away in his armor. Somehow Spidey convinced Zombie Hulk to be his ally and protector, and that all zombies must be destroyed no matter what. Giant Man's crew get ambushed and are surprisingly pretty outgunned in the fight, but Giant Man has been counting on them weakening Sentry just enough that he could trap him and use him as a power source for his teleporter. He's always planning ahead. He's such a shit. So this is it. He's about to open the doorway to the entire extended multiverse so he can just eat everybody forever. At this point, Giant Man and Spider-Man are probably close to 100 years old each, and have both killed billions of people. They're two opposing gods of death trying to decide the fate of all eternity, using their immortality and knowledge of science to build machines that will satisfy their own ends. Hank Pym will continue eating people forever because he really is too twisted to stop himself. And Peter Parker wants to save his own soul and redeem all the evil he's done since he was infected so long ago. In all the chaos, Spidey activates his weapon he's spent decades developing to kill all zombies. While Giant Man has spent all these years hunting down or infecting heroes and tinkering with Uatu's teleporter, Spider-Man took the healing factor from the uninfected Wolverine and inoculated Sandman to make the first character to be immune to the Hunger Gospel. Then fused his sand particles with Tony Stark's nanomachines that eat dead flesh, and essentially turned Sandman into an airborne anti-zombie cloud. He passes over them and their bodies just instantly disintegrate, including Spider-Man himself. Since the Sentry really can't be killed the same way as the rest, he's one big loose end. But Uatu reveals that he's secretly been alive and waiting this entire time, with a perfect solution to stop the hunger from ever hurting anyone else. He sends Sentry into the afterlife, where he punches Ash from the Evil Dead movies, and then he falls through time and space back to the original zombie universe, where he started the plague originally. That's right. This is now a crazy 100-year-long grandfather paradox split across two entire universes. The hunger virus technically has no origin at all, because Sentry falls from the sky and infects Wasp, who then infects Giant Man, who then travels to another universe decades later and infects the Hulk, who then infects the Sentry, who is sent through a portal, and Sentry falls out of the sky and infects Wasp.
Wait, if you destroyed them in the past, then he won't ever be your enemy. then you won't have to send a robot back to destroy him, and then he will be your enemy, so then you will have to send a robot back!
And it just keeps going in a circle for infinity. Uatu's plan was to quarantine the virus into just these two universes for all eternity, so that it can save the rest of the infinite multiverse. By sending Sentry backwards to start the cycle all over again, Uatu saved trillions upon trillions of identical lives across infinite numbers of universes, at the cost of these two worlds being permanently screwed up. Apparently being used as a human battery by Giant Man has somehow made his hair shorter and darker. Allegedly, Mark Miller and Greg Land intended for this to be Superman as a sly cameo in the original story, but the editors feared legal repercussions from DC and shot it down at the last minute, so they had to recolor him in Sentry's costume. But now there's an explanation for it. I don't mind that the virus doesn't technically come from anywhere. It just exists. It simply is. As other sci-fi stories have shown us, the more you explain the intricate backstory of an initially mysterious concept, the less interesting it becomes. Instead of a creepy and unknowable cosmic force of evil, it just becomes a dozen convoluted, contradictory paragraphs on a wiki page. Let this one be a permanent mystery. Some things don't need answers, but some things totally do. Where'd that guy go? The weird thing that always bothers me about this is that we never find out what happens to Sentry after he infects the Avengers at the beginning of the loop. He just bugs out and is never heard from again. Even the first miniseries confirms he's no longer on Earth, but he didn't follow the Galactabros. I think that's another fun, unanswered question that could totally be exploited for a future storyline if we ever wanted to revisit the original Zombieverse. Speaking of loose ends, I feel kind of bad for Earth Z in particular because that one had even less survivors. The total uninfected population of that whole universe now is like Cyborg Rhodey and Nano Sandman.
Hey.
What a bummer. I'll admit, I don't love this miniseries compared to the first two. The first one is awesome, the second one is decent but has some flaws that are kind of glaring, and this one is kind of a slog. Something about the magic was lost when that initial creative team didn't return for Return. While reading it for the first time, this does feel like 4 very disjointed and scattered anthology stories. But issue 5 does a great job of tying it back together. Everything all culminated in this final confrontation. And while it does feel very rushed, and a lot of details I'd have liked to see fleshed out were glossed over, I can't deny what a great concept this ending is. It delivers on something that I love, but most ongoing comics are notoriously bad at delivering. And that's satisfying closure. Zombie Peter's grief and guilt was treated like a joke by the other zombies, but he never let go of that feeling that they shouldn't continue doing these awful things. All of them lost their way, but he was still a hero deep down. And even decades upon decades later, he still found a way back to the light. After all the horror and sadness and trauma he's been put through, Spider-Man's true personality finally wins out over the virus, and he sacrifices himself to stop the hunger gospel once and for all. They laughed at him for his feelings of remorse, but he got the last laugh in the end by doing what no one else could. Zombie Spider-Man may have been the most tragic, gruesome, depressing, and screwed up version of this character ever put to official Marvel pages, but he also potentially saved the most people of all of them, and went out in a way very fitting for the character. While the ending of Marvel Zombies 1 with the Galacti zombies was a cool cosmic horror idea, I much prefer this nice and tidy bow to cap off this whole saga. This is a wonderful period to dot the end of the sentence. We could retire the entire Marvel Zombies concept right here, and I'd be perfectly fine with how it went. But of course, the thing about the walking undead is that they're quite hard to kill. In the grand scheme of the Marvel multiverse, Marvel Zombies has definitely left an imprint on the main books. I like to think that the deception and trauma of seeing this world was one of the factors that, in turn, caused Ultimate Reed Richards to become a villain. There's a lot of zombie Mr. Fantastic in the way the Maker speaks and acts, just minus the hunger for human flesh. He too would travel around to other universes to take them over and shape them in his image, creating the new Ultimate Universe we've been reading over the last 2 years. That's ending for no reason. It's a world where he's quietly subjugated the human race with the help of the local supervillains, and used time travel to deny all the superheroes their origin stories so they would be stuck living as regular people, or trapped in circumstances they can't escape from. It's not quite a zombie virus, but the Maker's behind-the-curtain fascistic malevolence is just as all-consuming and suffocating. Meanwhile, the original Marvel Zombies universe would be revisited multiple times over the years, with even more sequels written by various authors, and even the main 616 comics would occasionally butt heads with this creepy-ass world, thankfully beating them every time. They returned to this specific continuity a few more times after Resurrection ended, but it never felt the same after Kirkman and Phillips left the book. And as Kirkman's other zombie title shows us, zombie apocalypses are best consumed in short bursts. Eventually, you run out of stories to tell in such a limited setting, and it gets boring if it goes on for way too long. They've since created new books under the Marvel Zombies label about other worlds getting infected with a similar, but different virus of a different origin. Some folks online have observantly pointed out that Spider-Man is seemingly no longer allowed to be one of the zombies anymore, likely because he's Marvel's flagship character. Zombie Spidey notably stopped being a thing after Disney's acquisition of Marvel really took effect. This character was banned from appearing in the Spider-Verse comic crossovers and the animated movies, despite being pitched for both, and even appearing in Spider-Verse's unused concept art. Yeah, I wouldn't want him in the Spider Society anyway. If he bites someone, it's over. What the f***, Miguel? You'll let him in the Spider Society, but not Miles? He ate billions of people! They can't use this version of him for action figures either. He's not even allowed to appear on Marvel Zombies branded merch anymore. There was a kind of similar zombie Spider-Man-ish character in Punisher vs. the Marvel Universe, but that guy wasn't undead. Totally still alive, if slightly mutated. He was a crazed cannibal warrior, but his organs still worked like normal. Like, all of them. Maybe the higher-ups felt that they went way too far with Spider-Man and Marvel Zombies Return and opted to retire the character to preserve their brand. So, newer iterations of Marvel Zombies always feature Spidey as a heroic survivor that the zombies can't quite kill or infect. Or if he is infected, the story ends right there and doesn't show him hurting anyone. He's basically the main character of the newest volume and saves the whole world again. In a weird way, I'm okay with that. They did every sick and twisted thing imaginable with him in the original continuity, so there's not much more ground left to cover with Zombie Spider-Man as a concept. I don't need to see this character return, or for them to retread the same ground with a rebooted version of him. I do, however, think they're being overprotective by not allowing him to appear in any merchandise. Like, it's okay for him to be a Funko Pop or an alternate skin in a video game. It's not going to ruin the character's reputation any more than issue 1 of Returns already did. If they specifically modeled him to look more like the Sean Phillips art, it wouldn't even be that scary. Just Spider-Man with a skull-like face and a white eye peeking out of the ripped mask with a dirty costume. You could even make it look kinda cartoony like the Marvel Zombies animated movie did with Captain America. Even zombie Deadpool gets action figures without scaring anyone. Come on, guys, relax. It's fine. I think there's signs pointing to them easing up, though. In Cullen Bunn's Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe One Last Time, an all-powerful multiversal monster named Flux Paradoxica is trying to collect the most evil variants of every superhero out there to make a completely evil Marvel universe. Deadpool is tasked with fighting her, and along the way he bumps into a zombie Spider-Man and Ant-Man, even calls him out by name. This book was released in August of 2025, so this is the most recent zombie Spider-Man appearance by far. Maybe this issue means that they're loosening the leash on him after the last few years. Either way, Marvel Zombies isn't going anywhere with or without him. These days, Marvel Zombies lives on as a shambling corpse of its former self, getting rebooted and reimagined every few years, but it'll never hit as hard as it did back then. I must have read that first trade a dozen times a year when I was 7 years old onwards. I still remember some relatives coming over for Christmas or something while I was rereading the series one time, and I showed it to my cousin and tried my best to assuage his worries about all our heroes turning into cannibals by explaining the concept of a what-if story to him. My aunt looked at it and asked how I could read something so gnarly, and described the gore as hideous. And even when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I just said, I don't know, I just like it. Superheroes are cool, and so are zombies. And I think that's everything you need to know about it. That's why it's still here 20 years later. That's why Marvel Zombies will never die. I always get mad at YouTube for not putting my videos in the subscription box because people will comment, "Finally, Xavier uploads again after all these years." not knowing 3 other videos came out within the last month already. So maybe that stupid bell icon thing will help you remember I exist. If you want other ways to support the channel, you can always go hit up that Patreon for early videos and exclusive stuff because it's just $1. I'm not kidding, it's only $1. Isn't that cool? If just 5% of the people subscribed to me donated only $1 a month, I could make videos even faster and keep my house. You can also check out our merch on TeePublic, or just buy some of my random stuff on eBay. I have a pretty substantial collection of old toys that are still in the box in perfect condition, so go take a look in case you find something you like. And lastly, since this is a YouTube video and you probably play Fortnite, drop my creator code XavierGM next time you buy a silly dance or a cool character skin. Really helps me out. See you next time!